there's a word called veracity, which means I will honestly and truthfully tell the patient everything that I see so that they can make an educated choice about their own health.
This is Growth in Dentistry, a dental intelligence podcast, where we ask the question, what does growth in dentistry mean to you? I'm Steve Jensen, a dated dental nerd and your host.
Welcome, everyone. This is the Growth in Dentistry podcast, where we ask the question, what does growth in dentistry mean to you? My name is Steve Jensen, a total dental nerd and your host today. I am super excited for our guest, Victoria Peterson, the co-founder and CEO of Productive Dentist Academy. She has years and years of experience in the industry. In fact, they're one of the first partners of dental intelligence and helped inform a lot of the metrics we look at today. So I'm excited to talk with her and dive deeper on some of the things that they're teaching the industry and really up-leveling them. Now, before we jump into the actual podcast, special shout out to our sponsor, Dental Intelligence, for helping put this podcast on week after week. For those that are first-time listeners or have listened and haven't checked out Dental Intelligence yet, there is a link in the show notes where you can get a $50 gift card just for getting a demo and seeing what we're doing to try to give you more insight into your business and help take some of the tasks that your team members might be doing manually and automate some of them to keep them focused on the patients in their business. Now, with that being said, I want to jump in and I'm going to give a little teaser. So before I have Victoria tell us a little bit about her, over the last several weeks, this is going to be the first of this kind of nature of podcast and then education series. We're going to start releasing a DI. But I did an analysis of over 100 consulting firms in dentistry, an analysis of where here is my goal. Let me just share this. So I looked at a bunch of different benchmarks, hygiene reappointment and growth percentage and annual patient value and some case metrics, case acceptance, and how much are we presenting? And I wanted to understand, are there consulting firms out there that are able to consistently across all of their practices, so not just like an isolated few that are good, consistently across all their practices create a really strong outcome in any of these benchmarked data points? And one of the things that we're going to talk about today is I actually found two that I think are two of the most crucial points, the best outcomes, and PDA is in the top 10% of performers in the industry at doing this, at least their clients are. And it's not just a few that are bringing the average up. It's consistent across all the clients, which tells me that there are systems being taught, processes being implemented that are creating these outcomes. It's not just about having a few charismatic team members. So I am like more than elated to have this conversation with Victoria, like open up the hood a little bit and hear like, hey, what are some of these things that you guys are teaching? And so you're in for a treat today as we chat with Victoria from Productive Dentist Academy. So Victoria, thank you for joining. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, how did Productive Dentist Academy come to be? How did you get involved? What's the idea? And then we'll jump into some questions I have.
All right. It's so great to be with you here today, Stephen. As many people know, Productive Dentist Academy was founded as a partnership between myself and Dr. Bruce Baird of the Dallas, Texas area. And Bruce is undoubtedly one of the most productive dentists in America. Even now that he's hung up the handpiece, he's still taking classes on digital dentistry and 3D printing, and he's still involved in the practice. So he goes in occasionally and does things, and he's got some really cool stuff going on. But we started, Bruce and I had a long-term relationship on the speaking circuit. He was speaking, I was speaking, and I was with a different consulting firm. And I had created a program called Hygiene Mastery and was doing some work in his office. And when I retired from that company and disengaged, I actually was going to be out of dentistry completely. So go back to 2004, I was not consulting. I moved from Atlanta, Georgia to a little island north of Seattle. So I say I moved from 7.5 million of my closest friends to an island of 16,000
Nice.
to raise my two kids that were 10 and 12 at the time as a single mom. And I thought, that's it. I sold my consulting firm. I was good. I was just going to do that. And Bruce called and said, hey, I'm doing a seminar for dentists about productivity. And he goes, my thought is that productivity is not a team issue. Every time my friends are complaining about their staff, he's like, it's the 9 inches between your ears. That's what's getting you in trouble. Nice. So that's how it started. Bruce just got 8 of his buddies together that saw that he was producing, I want to say at the time, the national average was about 300 an hour for dentists. Now, to put that in context, 20 years later, the average production per hour for dentists is 400 an hour. So that hasn't moved very much. Bruce was at the time producing $12.50 an hour. So he was 4 times national average. And you got to put this in context clinically. You don't produce 4 times national average by redoing your work, by having a lot of emergencies interrupt your schedule. So clinical skills are at the basis. But I would say most of our clients that we see do start at that $375, $400, $500, $600 an hour. But many of our doctors are over that $1,250, $1,500, $2,000, I dare say $3,000 an hour, which sounds unbelievable. But it's because of the depth of their service mix and the depth that they care. So that's the foundation of PDA. It was to help highly skilled clinicians who had gone through all the continuums, all the big names, but they still weren't productive. They had all the skill in the world, but they couldn't get patients to say yes. And he ran his first workshop, and immediately they go, "Oh my God, the light is on. Now, will you train my team?" That's when my phone rang, and he goes, "I know you moved to this little island, you're retired, but would you come down?" So I sat in the back of the room as he's talking to the doctors. I had PowerPoint up. I just duplicated slides. If doctors need to know this, team needs to know that. He thought I was on Dental Town or emailing and not paying attention. So he's like, he was going to embarrass me. He says, "Hey, Vic, come up to the front of the room and tell them what the team program is going to be like." So I just took my UBS drive, plugged it in, did a 20-minute on this is the productive team program and what they would need to know. So on a handshake back in 2005, the whole company was started. And from then, we have a saying that we're member built and driven. So as people asked for things, we added more things. And today, I would say we're coast to coast. We're from Honolulu to Nova Scotia. And we're in rural, we're in urban, we're in suburban. We have expanded. We have a full service ad agency within our company. And we have lots of coaches that specialize in certain areas like clinical calibration, administrative, things like that. So it's been a joy to watch this grow as we just continue to serve.
Man, I can't tell you. I'm so excited to talk about it. So let's talk. One of the things you mentioned is, I'm going to frame it this way. I think a lot of listeners, if you're listening, you've probably had a lot of great ideas from this podcast, maybe, or from other continuing education that you've gotten. And one of the things that I notice is in all businesses, we have these great ideas, and then we struggle to actually get to implementation of those ideas. So at some point, I want to talk about that, Victoria, but let's start with a couple of metrics where PDA is exceptional. And I want to ask you a few questions about it. And then maybe we can finish talking about maybe some implementation suggestions. So the first one, and this one is amazing. So there's a number that we measure at DI called annual patient value. And it's really simple. It just looks at all of your active patients, your total collections, and like, what do you get per patient per year? And the industry average is just over $640. And a Productive Dentist Academy, their average is just over $1,000. So it's almost double the industry average. So I'm curious to know, like, what is it about? And you, I think, hinted at this just in the creation story, the founding story of PDA. But what is it like? What kind of things are you teaching businesses and practices that are yielding such an exceptional outcome? Because essentially, what that means, just for all listeners, you could see the exact same volume of patients and nearly double the production outcome of the business, which is really wild when you think about it that way. So Victoria, what are you guys teaching? And I know there's so many things that go into that number, but let's start unpacking some of them.
All right, I'll start unpacking with that statement because it's a myth. I don't think you can see the exact same number of patients and double your productivity with them. We actually slow practices down. And here's why.
Interesting.
I know your success formula is number of visits times visit value equals this. Mm-hmm. That's a volume game. That's a volume game. And we don't play the volume game. And here's why. Gordon Christensen came out with this stat years ago that 90% of dentistry is one-tooth dentistry.
90%.
90%. So 9 out of 10 patients in America, when they go to a dentist, I don't care if they have 2 cavities, 4 cavities, 3 missing teeth, whatever, they're going to get 1 crown because that's what insurance will cover. And so if you're tied to that mindset, and I'll tell you, if I'm talking trends for just a minute, it's the biggest trend that I'm so excited about in 2023. People are dropping insurances like flies. Never has it. I mean, we used to struggle to say, let's analyze it, let's figure it out, let's set a program. And now, since the pandemic, they're just like, throw that out the window. I'm committed to care. So number one, doctors really found the courage to tell patients everything they see. And when you have the communication skills, when you come from that place of, I want to be your health coach, I want to sit with you and tell you everything that I see. So we diagnose based on risk factors. And we could say, based on what we see with decay, I'd put you at high risk. And before I put a handpiece on your tooth, I want to talk about how you got here and what we're going to recommend for you to do at home after care so that this never happens again. So they put prevention first. And as crazy as that sounds, a lot of doctors do not embrace prevention. It's actually a new paradigm. Now, I was a dental hygienist by original training, so prevention's very natural for me. But I can remember the days where doctors were like, I don't want fluoride trays, I want molasses trays.
That's so bad. Are you serious?
So bad. Not the good ones. But also it was, there's this thing of let's just wait, let's watch. If you look at a lot of treatment plans, there's a lot of watches. And I'm okay to watch as long as you're shifting something at home. So let's do some sodium diethylamine and let's put you on some fluoride. Let's put you on carry-free. Let's do something and see if we can arrest this on your own. If not, then we're going to intervene clinically. But that's not what watching is for most. And there's no judgment here. It's just how consumerism is running through dentistry, right? So I've got insurance. And I will also say as an industry, we are non-confrontational creatures. So if we even think that we're going to upset a patient, we're not going to have the conversation. Like, I'm just going to avoid it. And so when the question comes up and they say, dang, doc, that's a lot of money, will my insurance cover it? We immediately back off and say, well, let's just do what your insurance will cover. But I would say, so step number one that really drives patient value is comprehensive care. And this isn't anything new. It's just something that takes courage to do. And it's actually written in the professional standard of ethics. There's a word called veracity, which means I will honestly and truthfully tell the patient everything that I see so that they can make an educated choice about their own health. And so it's just being comprehensive in your exam. And I know a lot of practitioners say, I don't want to be aggressive. And I get that. But diagnosing aggressively allows you to conservatively treat. So when you look at PDA doctors and they're doing more, their production per hour is higher, their patient value is higher, it's not because their fee schedule is their fee schedules are normal fee schedules. In fact, some of them, we need to raise their fees. They're still under fee, but they're not doing the 1 crown in a quadrant. They're doing the whole quadrant, or they're doing the half mouth. They're finding a way to remove the obstacles, and patients love it. They love a practitioner who's that straightforward and honest.
Which I'm going to actually share a stat since you just said this before we move on to the next thing. There's a number that we like to look at that is the average amount a practice is presenting for every exam that's completed. On the low end, I think it actually really exposes what you just said. One tooth dentistry on the low end, the average dollars getting presented on the treatment plan is $330. So that's like you said, two fillings, and then the patient maybe does one of them, and then the industry average is just over $800. Which is I think when you look at the number of exams being done, is certainly not like everything. And then the average practice working with PDA is about 1,250, right? So they're getting into this place where I think what you're teaching is clearly getting into the business in a really meaningful way. And then the other thing that I'll mention is I have a strong belief as well to add on to this idea that we want to make sure that patients have the ability to say yes or no to the treatment. It's our job to let them know like what's there and what are the best possible options. The other thing I always like to remind people is that we need to infuse in the patients a belief that investments in self are always worth it, right? Like this whole body that we have is the only body we get. Unless we start to get like
90 years.
yeah, bionic teeth and bionic limbs, like this is it. And so like, let's just reaffirm that to them, right? Like, hey, one thing we believe in our practice is that investing in ourselves is always worth it. And that we'll thank ourselves 30 years from now, 40 years from now, if we're taking the time today to invest in ourselves. And so I think that's helpful too, just to remind, my wife's a hygienist, and that's like the thing she would always say in her head was like, okay, I'm going to present fluoride, I'm going to present perio instead of doing a bloody prophy. And she just remind herself like, hey, an investment in self is always worth it. And that really helped like drive this, like, because people have BS filters. If you're just doing it for the money or for the wrong reasons, because your boss told you so, that comes through in your presentation. So if you're doing it because you really believe it's the best thing for patient, then that comes through in the way you communicate.
Especially in hygiene with all the oral systemic links. It's a no-brainer today. We're not educating about, we are educating, but patients are asking us. I'll tell you the sweetest story that I heard watching Bruce in action one day. There was a sweet couple in there. I'm going to say that they were in their early 80s, and she needed 2 implants and some crowns. We'll call it $3,000 back then. And the husband's like, well, Martha, I mean, I know you're worth it and all that, but that's a lot of money. We're going to have to think about that. And Bruce just leaned back and he said, you know what? That's smart. I would think about it. But here's what I want you to also think about. You have 20 teeth that are perfect. God gave you this wonderful asset. So if we put $3,000 per tooth on that, you have $60,000 worth of great dentistry. And these 2 teeth at $3,000 each, that's $6,000. So let me ask you this: if you needed to patch the roof in your house, would you fix the roof or would you sell the house?
Yeah, that's great. I love that.
And so telling patients the good news is something that I think that our doctors do well. It's like, congratulations, because people have a lot of shame around poor dental health. If I'm sick, if I got a virus or I broke my leg, that's something that happened to me. If my mouth falls apart, it's that I feel like I failed myself. And, you know, when you get down into the biology of it, some people just have bacteria that predisposes them. So being able to tell them like, this is probably not your fault. You know, you're genetically predisposed, you've got bacteria, you're at high risk, and we need to do something different to decrease your risk so that you can be healthy. So it really comes down to understanding risk factors.
So I'm going to ask you one more question. So you guys are able to get your doctors on board with this. Clearly, they're presenting treatment, they are implementing this idea. But one of the other things I think is really cool, normally when I see a practice start to present a lot of treatment, case numbers start to drop, right? So like case acceptance isn't as high, like it's below average. Or another one we look at is the treatment dollars that are being presented, like what percentage of those dollars actually gets completed. And you guys are still able to maintain an above average performance there, which is really exceptional. Like there's something cool that's going on. So do you have an idea or some ideas or tips you could share? Like how do you, if you're going to increase the amount you're presenting to patients, a lot of times those case numbers drop. So how do you do that in a way where your patients still continue to say yes? If you were presenting, let's say the average practice presenting $800, you're presenting more. How do you get the patient to continue to say yes at the same rate that they were before, or maybe even better with some of the things that you guys teach?
It comes down to the handoff with your team. And practices that are thriving and are above industry standard, the one thing that they consistently do is invest time, money, and resources in the continuing education of their team. They realize that it's not just these gifted hands, you know. And because we have a marketing ad agency and the business consultant, we infuse it together. We do a lot of relationship marketing. But you have to arm your team with tools. Number one, great financial options. And you have to change what we call the waterfall. And so most of the time we say, well, that's going to be $5,000. You want to put that on Visa or MasterCard, and patients instantly go, yeah, right. Because that is out of the range for most families. That's more than they have in savings, right? And so then you go, well, we have care credit. And if you get rejected, then I guess we can do a third, or we'll put you on some other type of in-house program. That is totally backwards from how you would want to engage a buyer. Like, you wouldn't go to Best Buy and say, well, here's the refrigerator. Like, they automatically say it's $89 a month. Would you like it? And then you look and you go, wow, that's 14% interest. I think I'll just pay cash. Right? So we have not really caught up yet as an industry, but there are tools out there that you simply plug in the treatment plan and it says, if you want the lowest payment, it's this. If you want a courtesy or discount for cash, it's that, and do it all in one process so that patients have. So what we try to do, I think, to compensate is we'll make 4 different treatment plans at 4 different price points instead of saying this is the best.
Yeah.
Now let's find a way to make payments that fit in your budget. So you've got to arm your team with great financial boundaries and do a lot of training on that. Give them the resources to do it electronically, stop sending statements and, all that kind of stuff. And just really invest in their knowledge. So the financial tools, but then number 2, clinical calibration. Do we all see the same thing? And when you have multiple doctors, multiple hygienists, that gets out of control really fast. So what is our standard of care? What do we believe in for our patients? What's our patient bill of rights? Those are the things that it's relationship that drives productivity.
I like the phrase you just said, patient bill of rights. Like, I kind of want to know, like, what kind of things end up on a patient's bill of rights? Is that like a patient has the right to know what treatment is it? Like, I'm like, I love that idea. That's cool. Tell me about that.
We may have to throw that into an extended webinar.
Okay, sounds
like
good.
the whole topic, isn't it?
Yeah. I love that idea. Is that the concept? Like, it's like, hey, these are the rights of the patient. Like, a patient comes in our business and these are the things that they deserve from us as clinicians, as people who are serving them.
Yeah, and it comes down to the key characteristics that you want in your team. Are we a team that believes in relationships? Are we a team that on a daily basis engages in active listening and not talking to, but asking from, things like that? And then also goal setting. We think that the true success formula is emotion plus data equals decisive action. So if emotionally you can connect, you're in relationship, you can present the facts, this is where you stand from my opinion. This is the benefit of taking care of this now. These are the consequences of not taking care of it. And this is the investment. Now, Summer is your advocate. And the things she's really great at is, number 1, helping you fit it into your busy life. And number 2, helping you fit it in your budget so you don't have to worry about the financial aspect. So when you connect and the only emotion, I'll give you this as a true blue, I did research on this for the Academy of Cosmetic Dentistry 2 decades ago. It still holds the one and only emotion where patients say yes is confidence. So of course, fear. No, of course they trust you. They walk through your door, right? And they like you, they're connecting with you, but they have to be confident that A, what you're saying is true. Like, you really are accurately diagnosing this. B, you've got the skills to deliver on what you see. And 3, I can afford this. So I trust that you're being honest. I trust you're not going to hurt me, and I trust that I can pay for it. Those confidence, you have to check off all 3. If you've got 2 out of 3, they don't say yes. They say things like, well, let me go home and ask my spouse. And that's where the team really comes in as well. They will always, when you leave the operatory, look to your assistant or hygienist and say, do I really need this? And your team's confidence in you and your team's tools 70% of your return on investment with marketing comes from what happens in the practice. So you could throw $8,000 a month on a big, expensive external campaign, but if we don't have these systems in the patient journey correct and rehearsed and dialed in, you lose 70% of your ROI.
Man,
So,
Victoria, we need to schedule like a 3-hour deep dive where you and I just talk and I just mine this beautiful knowledge out of you. This is awesome. Well, we're coming up on time. So we always ask the question to end, what does growth in dentistry mean to you? So we've heard some amazing things today about how can we think through creating this outcome where we have a high annual patient value. And you suggested that really revolves around, if I'm hearing you correctly, really revolves around the patient experience, creating confidence in the way that we're presenting the case, making sure that patients know that we're giving them the best options and that telling them everything they need done, but then not the best options from a clinical perspective, but then also from a financing perspective. We talked about a few other team elements and it has been a treat. So I would love to hear from you. What does growth in dentistry mean to you? And we'll wrap it up.
I think in this time where we're consolidating, and we are in a consolidated industry, what my big dream is and my hope is that we continue to forge authenticity. So growth in dentistry for me means working on clearing the stress from the providers. There's a lot of mental stress in our industry. And I think that's probably why I went back and studied spirituality in such depth and earned a doctorate in that in 2018. And so helping people decrease stress is the number one way to increase productivity, and helping patients decrease their stress and fears. So that really comes from being connected, authentic, and genuine, and building relationships. So I hope as we continue to consolidate and private equity has a bigger footprint, I hope that all of us remember why we got into this profession to begin with, which is to deepen our own love and compassion for each other and to serve our communities.
What a beautiful answer. And I believe that one of the reasons why I fell in love with dentistry is because, at the private practice level, it's such a key element of that community. You think about thousands of people just flowing through this business every 6 months. And it's a beautiful place for you to have an impact on your immediate circle of influence in the community, which I agree is such a great way to look at the space. Well, thank you, Victoria, for joining us. For those, I'm assuming, a lot of the listeners are like, hey, great ideas. I would love to connect with you and Productive Dentist Academy. What's the best way for them to connect with you and your team, Victoria?
Yeah, if you go to productivedentist.com, there is a really cool assessment that you can take, and you'll get a report back on it and show you where you have opportunities within the practice in our investment grade practice platform. So there's something there. It's totally free, but go to productivedentist.com. You can reach out to info@productivedentist.com or victoria@productivedentist.com. We're pretty simple, pretty easy to get a hold of.
Sweet. And we'll put all those in the show notes so those that are listening, if you're commuting and you want to check in afterward, we'll put the website and the emails in the show notes.
We also have our award-winning productivity workshop coming up at the end of September.
Please tell.
Yeah, pre-pandemic, we used to do those 5 times a year. We're now doing them 2 times a year. And I believe we still have a few seats left. So that's the last week of September, if anybody's interested in that.
And where are you guys hosting?
Dallas,
yes.
Very centrally located, and consistently for 20 years, we watched doctors and teams leave there and grow $200 to $300 an hour in productivity coming out of a 2-day workshop. So invite everybody to that. That'll be the last one for the year.
That's perfect. Yeah, I would definitely encourage people to go. I mean, if you listen to this, I don't see any reason why you're not pulling up the website right now to register to be at that event. What a gift to get to come spend time with you and your team. So thank you again for joining, Victoria. Once again, this has been a Growth in Dentistry podcast, and I invite all of you to keep growing.